Thanks, Romain, for this nice introduction. Thanks a lot, everyone, for being here. It's a great pleasure for me to meet you. Last year I met all of your colleagues because I followed in a more systemic way these seminars. But then this year is the first time I come, so I'm really happy to meet you all. And my presentation, as you know, is about digitalization of currencies, technical innovations and geopolitical disputes. Actually, I sent you 2 readings, but the presentation I'll do here is not only based in these 2 readings, because I've been here in France precisely to study this topic. I guess she will change it. Yes. So I'm writing quite a few articles on that with some colleagues here in France, and then I will use these other papers as well, which are still not published. That's why I didn't send them to you. But you're gonna see, don't be surprised that the presentation is not a strict presentation of the paper you will comment. So it's nice that you will comment the one with Jean-François Ponceau, because then I will talk about other things, and then maybe you will present my paper better than me, because I'll go to right and left in these discussions. Okay. Here we go. Just for those, most of you don't know me, so just to say what are my departing points, because obviously when we are studying the central bank digital currencies, we have people from computer science, we have people from, I don't know, mainstream economics studying it. You can go only to the technical issues, but those are not my focus. Those are all important focus, but my focus, I come from a different perspective. This is what I mean. So what I study, as Roman said, is the hegemony of the dollar, right? The hierarchies of the international monetary system, the problems that we in Brazil, I'm Brazilian, we have coming from the fact that we have a currency which is not an international currency. And nowadays, the weaponization of the US dollar, right? So the dollar as a weapon, as a bomb. The whole discussion, I try to follow also the discussions on the BRICS, and then the idea that lost momentum, but if you want, we can also discuss it at the end, about a BRICS currency. But the idea of de-dollarizing the world is still there, even if the BRICS are not anymore thinking, at least not officially, on a BRICS currency. Then here comes my discussion in this framework, my discussions on the crypto assets, and very importantly in the cryptocurrencies, because there is a difference, and I'll let you know, right? So from this geopolitical point of view, not from the technical issues related to the topic. This is the outline. I'll just mention some basic elements of CBDCs for those who do not know this discussion, and then I'll come into the politics and geopolitics of 3 layered things. So technology, regulation, and then a little bit about digital information flows. And then the ultimate question, which I always have in my mind, Roman somehow has it as well, what can reshape the international monetary and financial system? Do CBDC can reshape it or not? So the whole discussion is to try to see if you are seeing or not a movement at the international monetary and financial system. Currently, digital innovations in the realm of finance and money are in everyday Financial Times first lines. I don't know if you have if you usually read Financial Times, but you certainly read other papers, and you can see that every day, every single day, there are discussions about it. So it is a moment in which many persons from different areas are discussing this, that even the IMF names as a money revolution, right? So just to justify that this is an important topic. There is a difference and it is important to establish this difference, just to start the conversation between crypto assets and central bank digital currencies. So everybody knows when I tell, well, I'm studying CBDCs, Bitcoin, and it's not exactly the case, because Bitcoin is the one which is mostly known by everybody, but it's not precisely a cryptocurrency. Why? Simply because it's not a currency, right? It's an asset, a financial asset. You can lose a lot of money and you can earn a lot of money investing in Bitcoins. I don't know if you do it, but it's not currency, right? The crypto assets came, and out of the technology created for the crypto assets, and even some technologies that existed before, the whole idea on CBDCs also came. So CBDCs, as the name says, are currencies of central banks, right? Liabilities of central banks. So it's totally different from, and I'll come back to that later as well, from Bitcoin or Tether or whatever, there's other kinds of crypto assets. Then when we come to the discussions which are important for me, because I try to go through studies on the international monetary system, we have also to see what is being said, studied, analyzed in terms of the cross-border payment systems, right? So I'm trying not only to see currencies within the borders of the countries where they are issued, but rather circulating in the world. And then there are discussions about the new payment systems that should be created for the central bank digital currencies. And it's very interesting that the BIS, but almost all institutional reports that you can read, the G20 talks about it, the BIS talks about it, many central banks in the world are talking about it, but they insist in a kind of a mantra, which is this one. The digital currencies, the central bank digital currencies will allow faster, cheaper, more transparent, and more inclusive cross-border payment services. This is quite important for those here who are not French or who are not European. Some of you have scholarships, so it's not a problem. But for some of you who have to receive money from abroad or who have to send money to abroad, you already faced this problem. It's terrible. It's really a nightmare. It takes 2 days if you are lucky, if not 1 week, to send your money. You pay fees. So it's a big problem. The current cross-border payment system is totally dysfunctional. And it's a big problem, especially for immigrants who come from the global south, from Brazil, from other countries in the global south, and then they try to send remittances to their families. And they pay, I don't know, 5%, sometimes 10%, depend on the corridor, as fees to Western Union. It's really nonsense. So you see that the current system is completely dysfunctional. So it's quite important to discuss a system that can be faster, cheaper, etc. But it's not everything, right? Because we have to look into the political dimensions of these discussions. And my claim here is that these reports are just not taking it into consideration. And this is what I try to do. Why? Because as many people in this room, I consider money as power, right? Money is power. Money is not only obviously, it's not a veil, as mainstream economics says, but it's not only a technical thing. It's not only about macroeconomics. It's geopolitics and politics are behind all discussions related to money. So the objective of my presentation here is to analyze those political and geopolitical dimensions associated to central bank digital currencies and the cross-border payment systems, with this hypothesis that this moment we are living and both crypto assets and CBDCs are provoking important transformations in the global political economy, right? And as I anticipated, with the ultimate question, if, well, the CBDCs and the new cross-border payment systems can or not change the asymmetries of the international monetary system. Then methodologically, it's important to understand that there are two dimensions of power when we are talking about the international political economy. One is the relational one, meaning that a country can have power when dealing with a second one. So in the bilateral relations, some countries can impose or try to impose their wills, right, in the bilateral relation. But the structural power is the power, according to Strange and the international political economy, the structural power is the power to change the structures of the system to your own interest, you know. And then obviously not every country can do it. The hegemonic country can do it. And then those who are disputing the hegemony, they can try to change the structures. The others, they are in these relational bilateral relations, trying to have power over a second country, but without changing the structures. Having that in mind, when we are seeing when we are discussing power, what I'm doing here is trying to see into technology, type and control technology, regulation, as vectors for as something which comes from power relations and at the same time can increase or decrease the power of a country, you know. So there are important means of, let's say, exercise of power. The determination of standards, international standards, in terms both of technology and regulation are really important for a country which is a powerful country and is trying to consolidate or to keep its hegemony, right? And this relates also, both technology and regulation relate to the possibility of accumulating information data that can be used as a tool as well, either for profit or for political reasons, but it can be a very rich weapon as well, the accumulation of data, as you know, right? So this is the methodology. I'm analyzing a lot of reports, academic literature, but I'm doing some interviews as well with central bankers mostly, and people from multilateral institutions. My focus, not by chance, is in the triad, let's say, which is US, Eurozone, and China. But behind it, I'm always trying to understand where is the Global South and how the Global South can navigate this whole situation. Basic elements, for some of you it will be repetitive, but some maybe are not so familiar with the discussion. What are the origins of central bank digital currencies? The literature goes into two things to explain why central banks are trying to develop central bank digital currencies. One is, well, we are living digitalization in all dimensions of human life. With the pandemic, it has been accelerated in many dimensions, so it's unavoidable. People are paying, even in Europe, in other countries, even in Brazil, it was more common than here to pay with credit cards. But things are changing even here, so cash is used less and less. So digitalization of everything and digitalization of payments is an unavoidable trend, right? But there is a watershed in this discussion, which is when Mark Zuckerberg announced that he would create a currency, what he named it as a currency, right, or a crypto asset if you want, Libra, for Facebook. I don't know if you remember it or if you were too young at that time. But well, it was a scandal because at the same time people saw that he had potential to do it. Why? Because money is many things, but it is related also to networks. Money is accepted by one person if we think that it will be accepted by a second person and a third person. So it is about networks, right? And Facebook having millions or billions, I don't even know, of users in the world could use this network to create a currency that could circulate worldwide. So it became a scandal. Even in the US, people resisted to this idea at that time. And then this is the moment when many central banks in the world, some central banks were already thinking of it even before, but this is the moment where most central banks in the world started doing research on the viability, the pertinence of developing their own digital currency to curb the threats of, let's say, Libra or any other kind of crypto asset, right? What is CBDC? It's simply a liability of the central bank, but in a digital format. So it's like cash, but in a digital format. And then people say, well, but we have it in our cell phones, we can do transactions. Not necessarily. You as economists, you know it. Because when we use our cell phones, we are paying with bank money, right? We are using our bank accounts. The deposits are being transferred from me to Romain, and etc. But then in this case, we will have the possibility of having directly a liability of the central bank, not in our pockets, but in the cell phone. This is the idea. Right? But it won't replace cash. There is a lot of fake news on that, saying that, well, it's the end of the cash and so on and so forth. But in any place in the world they are thinking of it, it won't replace cash. The idea is having it, well, both side to side, right? It will be another kind of cash. And a final important dichotomy, and then we move ahead, is between retail and wholesale CBDCs. Because retail CBDCs are those which will be used by us, by households, by companies, and wholesale by financial institutions, banks. Right. So this is an important division as well, because in different countries, central banks are exploring possibilities related either to both or to one of the, so not necessarily both. For euro, for instance, it's retail. Here it comes. We can come to some examples to the triad before. Well, as I said, more than 130 central banks in the world either are exploring or have done research on that. If we come to the three most powerful countries or region, in the case of the Eurozone of the world, the US is an exception in this kind of race. They had an ambiguous position in regard to central bank digital currencies even before Trump. But in 2022, because there is a lot of resistance in the US against CBDC, not new, but it comes from the past, I don't know. And it is related to the libertarian ideology, which says that CBDCs will strengthen the power of central banks, so they prefer monies which are not state money, So they also say that, well, it's also a kind of fake news that it will be possible to track everything you pay, so it will mean more state control. So there is all these fake news. They are in the United States, in the United Kingdom as well. They are strong in the US, but also a very important lobby from banks and from crypto asset managers, right, which led to this resistance to CBDCs in the US. Even though in 2022 Biden published a White House order asking for urgency in the researches related to a digital dollar, but Trump in January the 23 this year, and it's important the date because, as you probably know, he took office in January 20. It's my birthday, that's why I remember. It was not a very happy birthday. But 3 days later, so in the third or the fourth day of his mandate, of his new mandate, he already released this new White House order revoking Biden's one and banning research related to a digital dollar. So you can see in the fourth day of his mandate. So in the first day, he was making things about immigrants. The second day, so in the fourth day, he banned the possibility of developing a digital dollar, right? So it shows how important it was for him. And it's not by chance. He received a lot of money as lobby and for his campaign from crypto asset managers, right? He and a lot of people from both parties. That's why, and I'll come back to that later, both parties are voting in favor of stable coins and so on and so forth. There is massive waves of money flowing into both Republican and Democrat Party, but obviously for the campaign, Trump received a lot of money for that. And he constituted the same day the President's Working Group on Digital Asset Markets. So he made a choice, a clear choice, that the digitalization process is unavoidable, okay. Let's do it through the private market, not through public currencies. Let's do it through private currencies, or as I would name it, private assets, private crypto assets. That's the choice. right? The Eurozone, they started doing research as a reaction also for Libra and so on, for digital euro in 2021. The idea is creating a retail CBDC. The regulation is being discussed next week, possibly, or in 2 weeks. There will be the draft of the regulation, which is being discussed in Brussels. And the expectations are, it's still not clear. There is still the risk that everything will be abandoned, but I don't think so. I would say that, well, it will be for something like 2028 or 2029. And then China comes, and then even if I put it in the last place, it was precisely to show you that it is in the avant-garde, is in this process. So even before the Libra issue, in 2016, they created at the People's Bank of China a Digital Currency Institute. The digital renminbi was launched for development, testing, and nowadays there is already a lot of people, millions of people downloaded the app and are not using as the PBOC would expect. But still, China is so big that it is the CBDC that is being more used in the whole world. Okay. Even if it is still not completely disseminated, it's still in this pilot phase. Also retail CBDC. Let me speed up a little bit. Potential effects, maybe I will discuss it later. Let me speed it up because otherwise I won't go into the end. So now coming to the politics and geopolitics in technological standard setting. One of the layers that I want to discuss of this geopolitical dispute. The first political obstacle to define the technological standard comes from sovereignty, right? So we are talking about money. We are talking about something that should be in principles related to full sovereignty, or at least high sovereignty of the state, right? And the central bank digital currencies in the whole world, including in China, they are being developed through partnerships of the central banks with private institutions everywhere in the world. Okay. Why? Because this private actors may be more flexible for innovations, have technological domain in some aspects that can be useful, but in my opinion, also as a way to curb the resistance to the project, you know. So instead of these central banks doing it alone, they are inviting private partners to do it together in order to make it more feasible, politically speaking, as well. Fair enough, but obviously it may create, potentially at least, a problem related to, well, the technologies at the end, they will be public or private. Do it create a risk or a vulnerability for the public sector, the fact of relying in technologies which are being created by... So this is one of the possible contradictions or the possible risks, right, related to this public-private partnerships. And the other one is related to, and it's the risk is higher, national or foreign technologies, right? We are in the different countries relying on national or foreign technologies for the development of that. And then I won't go into the details, but Schumacher has an interesting book discussing the CBDCs, and he highlights 5 layers of technology which may be important for CBDC, and then in quickly seeing into these five layers, we can see the risks that appear. Starting with the server, for instance. The whole system can be set up in secure data centers or private cloud infrastructure. And then obviously it would be better to have within the country. And here you can see the worst example I found, the counter example, which is being done by the Eastern Caribbean Union, which are the islands in the Caribbean. So Santa Kitts and Nevis, they have a common currency. And the Dcash, which is being developed, will be hosted at Google Cloud, you can imagine. You can imagine how sensible it can be. In my university, Unicamp, we use Google Meets, and I'm already a bit afraid of that, putting everything of my university, in the Google. And then you can imagine putting everything related to the currency of your country or your union into Google Cloud. So this is the counter example, and then obviously, well, countries have to try to search for a kind of sovereignty related to the server, right? Second, software. The best solution is obviously developing in-house software in each central bank. But then, if this is not possible, then at least understanding the licensing differences, well, if it belongs to a private company, national company, or foreign company, and so on and so forth. Because sanctions can also come through softwares. If a system uses some softwares, and then from the US, let's say, and then the US wants to sanction, then it can just forbid this software to be used, So it's also a sensible layer for technological discussions. Network infrastructure, intranet or internet. Consensus building mechanism. Then it's a bit more complicated, but the idea is that there is no need for a third party to verify the operations. This is the whole idea behind blockchain, for instance. And then there are different technologies, different kinds of DLT, the distributed ledger technology. We don't need to go into the details. And obviously the device, the computer, the cell phones, so on and so forth. So I just want to show you that, well, in principle, it's very important for central banks to think of that and think on how to reduce the loss of sovereignty which can come from the development of CBDCs. Then coming again, US, Eurozone, and China. Bilotta has a very interesting book on CBDCs as well. And he says that, well, the US is facing somehow the innovator's dilemma. So it is in the avant-garde of the system, the monetary and financial system, but it may lose, the other countries may not only catch up, but even move ahead the US in terms of the technologies related to CBDC, right? In this White House order released by Biden, I think it's another one, but also in 2022, there was an interesting thing for the US, obviously, that the Department of Commerce should assist US firms to export technology, technological services, and tools related to digital assets. Why? Not only because of the profits, but very importantly, because of the possibility for the US, if US firms start exporting technology, for them to determine, to set the technological standards, right? So again, it's not only about profits and technical issues. It's about geopolitics, right? It was revoked by Trump because he made this U-turn, and now he's totally, his strategy is totally concentrated in the crypto assets. But still, the whole idea is that innovations will come from the US market related to stable coins and other crypto assets, and then we'll set the standards for the world, right? For Europe, the Eurozone, and now we are obviously discussing not only the CBDCs within a country, but again, the CBDCs being used internationally, right? And the Eurozone the Euro system is taking part in a lot of projects normally coordinated by the BIS Innovation Hub. For those who are interested, it's very interesting that they are coordinating a lot of projects for cross-border payment systems in CBDCs. And the Euro system is really involved in these projects, in many of them. You can check it later. But so it's a way also to try to think on these technologies. And then obviously, if they are for cross-border payment systems, they can influence other countries in the world, right? And but one caveat is that for those projects led by the Euro system, normally the other partners are also from the global north. And it's different, for instance, from China, which has one project, but a very interesting project, important project. Let's see where it goes, but still, which is the Enbridge project. So China is one of the countries, but I would say that it is the leading country in this project with 4 other full members, trying to create also a CBDC cross-border payment system, but only with Global South countries. This is the important characteristic of this project, right? So it's Thailand, Saudi Arabia joined later, and then Arab Emirates, and then Hong Kong with China, right? The BIS took part for a while, but they abandoned the project. It's important, I'll come back to that later. So now only countries of the Global South are taking part in this project. And then it created its own ledger, the Enbridge ledger. Central banks participate in the blockchain consensus, but commercial banks now. But then the important thing is that, well, even if it allows for autonomy of the different jurisdictions, different countries in terms of the development of their CBDCs, there is a push for interoperability, right, of the different currencies. And then it might be seen as a stimulus for the new central bank digital currencies to search for interoperability, to be part of this project, and so on and so forth. So it may be seen as a way of trying to establish standards, international standards as well. Coming to regulation, now politics and geopolitics in designing CBDC regulation. Then again, we have a lot of things to discuss internally within a country, and then for the cross-border payment system, starting again with the domestic dimension. The first thing as well, it has to be recognized as money. So even changes in law may be necessary to recognize the digital euro as euro, you know, so CBDCs as cash, right? So many changes in the regulation will have to be done. It's not by chance that, well, this regulatory framework of the digital euro is taking so long to be discussed, with a lot of controversies, because there are many important questions related to that, right? And that's why also the private entities are completely committed in the effort to influence this regulatory framework. So when you see in Brussels this whole discussion around the digital euro regulatory framework, you see that banks are there. Individually, collectively, the European Association of Banks, they are doing a very strong lobby with the European Parliament members to influence this regulatory framework, right? And they are having some successes. I'll let you know later. What are the questions? A lot, but well, households can have accounts directly at central banks, or it will be intermediated by banks or other payment service providers. In many countries, it will be the second choice. It will be intermediated, right? Central bank digital currencies will bear interest rates. It's a possibility. You can have, ideally, you can have, hypothetically, an account at the central bank and it can have interest rate. But probably no. They won't, at least in many countries, including in the Eurozone, it won't bear interest rates. Is there a cap for the amount of digital currency each of us can have? Then this is one of the vectors of intense lobby of the banks, because they want a small cap. They don't want people to try to invest, starting to invest a lot in CBDCs and taking out their money from the bank deposits, you know. They don't want to lose money that of the bank deposits flowing into CBDCs. So there is a very strong lobby. The allegation is that it is important to avoid financial instability. But then in Europe, for instance, the cap that is being discussed is 3,000 euros. And then combining these two things, and they are explicit on that, it's not me who who is saying that the idea is creating a digital euro in the case of Europe, which will be used as a means of payment, but not as a store of value. So if you remember the very first lecture you had in Introduction to Economics, the functions of money. So the idea is creating something that will be a means of payment, but they don't want the digital euro to be a store of value. You can only have 3,000 euros and it won't have interest rates. Why? Because then you have to store value in the banks. Okay. Will non-residents have access to CBDCs? Then another important discussion. In China, we can already download the app. We as non-residents, I mean. In Europe, it will be allowed, but with very strict regulation, both from the Eurozone and the third country, in order for non-residents to have digital euros. So it depends a lot, and it's important to see if countries are trying to push the internationalization of their currency through CBDCs or not, right? Programmability for payments and money. This is a very interesting thing as well. I don't know if you heard about it. Programmability for payments is something common already. So every month, the electricity bill directly I pay from my bank account. I don't even know, you know. But for money is something new. Theoretically, you can do a digital currency, which can be used only for specific purposes, for instance. So you can do a money which can be used only to buy food, not to buy alcohol. Or you can do a money which has an expiration date, a kind of a money that has purchasing power for the next 2 months, but let's say 31st December is the last day. January the 1st, the money just disappears. Theoretically, this will be possible. And why it may be relevant for social policies. So for instance, if you want to do a cash transfer program, but then you want to give money for people to buy food and not alcohol, then it's programmable, you know. In Brazil, we have a very interesting program for cash transfer, Bolsa Família. Do we have Brazilians in the room? Okay. Wow, a lot. Bolsa Família. And how do they do it to avoid people buying alcohol? They transfer the money to the women instead of transferring to the men. So there are studies which show that women take more care of money than. So it's true, it's true. But then with programmable money, it can be done automatically, you know. Or for this expiration date, you can do programs to revamp the economy, such as the ones that were done during the pandemic, giving money that can have to be used in 1 month time frame, you know. Why? Because you don't want transfer money for people if they will save it. You want to avoid the liquidity trap, you know. You want to send money to people in order for them to spend it and then multiply and so on and so forth, you know. And then one way of doing it is but so there are potentialities, but the central banks, many central banks in the world are denying that they will do it. Why? What they say is that the essence of money is being universal purchasing power, and they don't want to harm this very essence of money. So even if it is an interesting exercise on thinking on the possibilities, many central banks are not, the ECB is saying he won't do it, but some other central banks are exploring this possibility. In Russia, I heard that they possibly can do it. I don't know if it's Thailand. So some central banks are considering this possibility. Thailand, okay. And then, well, still with regulation. Will a supranational body, who will set the rules? We will have a supranational body setting the regulations. If we have one, then the first candidate would be the BIS, because it's involved in several projects. It's very much in favor of CBDCs. But obviously the BIS has its biases. It's an institution well controlled somehow by the global north. You know, I'll come back to that later as well. The ISO, International Organization for Standardization, is also establishing a group for CBDCs, has also established, for definitions and for information exchange. This can be also something important. And it's interesting to see that the study group has a senior executive of JP Morgan as a convener. So you see also the private actors succeeding in influencing the process, right? Then coming back to the triad, well, for the cross-border payment systems, the Eurozone somehow relies on what is named as the Brussels effect, that, well, in the Eurozone, you have expertise in doing supranational things. This is a beautiful thing in Europe. The European Union has plenty of programs, but interesting things as well. And it's interesting to see that, well, and then what is done here as a supranational regulation for the Eurozone can be understood as something that can influence other countries, right? So this is the idea. And in terms of regulation, the European Commission is, in comparison to many other countries in the world, is ahead because it's trying to approve this legislative proposal I mentioned. And for the, I can leave it here because I'll talk here. And then in China, for the cross-border payment system, I forgot mentioning it, but even if the mBridge project is a project which has five Global South countries, the subcommittee for technology is chaired by China, not by chance, and the subcommittee for legal things is chaired by Hong Kong. And you know that the People's Bank of China has a lot of influence in Hong Kong. So you see that China is, well, ahead of the other, China and Hong Kong, ahead of the other three countries in the possibility of trying to push for technology and regulation that they want to establish, you know. And then there is a big, very important dispute nowadays here in Europe and in the US related to stable coins, right? You follow it. In July in the US, the Genius Act was approved, which provides the regulatory framework for stable coins, and it is considered by most analysts as something that, well, provides, it's very weak in terms of the regulation, the surveillance. It's very permissive, and it may even lead to the configuration of bubbles and a subprime crisis 2.0. I don't know if you heard this expression, a new financial crisis with great proportions related to stable coins. They have three pieces so the Genius Act has been approved, Clarity Act in the first chamber, it's now in the Senate, and the Surveillance Act, it's still not being, it's been discussed, and it's all about banning the digital dollar, you know. So they have important discussions in the US in the sense of pushing the whole world in the direction of stable coins instead of central bank digital currencies, and in the direction of allowing the US-backed stable coins issued by US companies to go to the whole world, including these social media, so X, Amazon, the big techs, right, Facebook, and so on. And in Europe, there is an interesting regulation, MiCA, which many understand that can curb the potential harmful effects of stable coins in Europe. But this is a big discussion. I have to speed up again. Well, now digital information flows. I'll try to go very quickly because, well, as you know, only a few countries in the world have digital sovereignty, right? For the others, the US have access to that. And then it was very clear with the SWIFT thing, even in Europe. It was a big scandal some years ago when the US could go into, in principle, secrecy of the SWIFT in terms of operations, alleging that, well, it was to face terrorism and so on and so forth. So, well, there is a whole discussion if with CBDCs and the new CBDCs, cross-border payment systems, who will have access to this data, to what purpose, is it desirable that people can have access to that or not? Can it be done without infringing personal privacy? Because at the same time, just to sum it up, we can imagine that it can be a good thing for central banks, not for particular central banks, but for a supranational institution to have access to this massive database, which will, at the end of the day, comprehend all economic transactions in the whole world, you know. And it can be used for good purposes. It can be used to recognize reversal of cycles and then curb the reversal of the cycles, you know. But obviously, it can also be used for bad purposes, meaning search of profit for private actors or search of national interests for national states. So there is also a whole discussion on that. I will skip it. And then I'll arrive to my final question. After all, and having in mind all the discussions that we had now, will CBDCs and digital cross-border payment systems reshape the hierarchies of the international monetary and financial system? It's interesting to see that even before the name was coined, CBDC, there were some attempts to create a kind of CBDC, a kind of a central bank currency, digital currency, in Latin America. In Ecuador, it was the first one. I don't know if we have people from Ecuador or Venezuela in the room. One, okay. But the dinero electrónico was created in Ecuador. It is a dollarized economy, as you know. And then Rafael Correa was against the dollarization, but he could not just reverse the tendency, the dollarization, and recreate. So he tried, his government tried to create a national currency through a digital one, the dinero electrónico. It was a total failure, okay, because people wanted to keep using dollars. And also the opposition made a big campaign against it and so on and so forth. And in Venezuela, they also tried to do it, the Petro, which was supposed to be backed by oil barrels. But it's all related to the currency hierarchies, right? So in this case, they wanted to revert a process of dollarization. In this case, they had lack of US dollars, so they wanted to have a new currency in order to face this lack of liquidity. So the CBDCs avant la lettre, it's not by chance that they were created in the periphery of the world. There were ways of trying to face the problems related to the dollar hegemony. And the CBDCs which have been already launched, we have only 4 in the world. They are all in the global south. The very first one was Bahamas, Sun Dollar, Nigeria, Naira, Jamaica, and Zimbabwe. Those are the 4 currencies which have been created for different reasons, but the common thing is also related to the dollar. So at least in Zimbabwe and Nigeria, the idea was trying to create trust again in the national currency to curb a process of dollarization, which is very hard. And then the 4 examples are still not so successful. The USA, how can we put this whole discussion within the framework of the hierarchy of currencies? This is a sentence by Bilota, but well, the current global financial architecture sustains and mirrors US power globally, right? It was created, it was shaped by the US, the current IMFS. We should not forget that we had the Bretton Woods system created in 1944, already under a strong influence by the US, but then in 1971, 1973, unilaterally, Nixon finished with the Bretton Woods system in 1971 with the convertibility of dollar into gold and reshaped the international monetary system to its own interests of the US. So it's a system that was shaped by the US. And that's why in the beginning I mentioned this distinction between relational and structural power, because what I see now is that the US is trying to use its structural power in order to reconfigure the structures of the international monetary and financial system, to keep dollar hegemony. That's the point, right? So Eric Monet here in France is doing studies on that. He names it as crypto mercantilism. There are discussions on that because on one hand, Trump is doing bad for the US dollar. It's not by chance that gold, the price of gold is increasing because 10 minutes, okay, thanks. Because, well, there are several reasons for people now to do not rely, for those who use it to rely in the US. Bonjour. So the dollar is somehow losing the role for some. The dollar is losing the role as the anchor of the financial system. This is one possibility of seeing the things, but this whole thing that of creations of stable coins, regulating it in a weekly way, trying to disseminate it all over the world, can be seen as a way of keeping the dollar hegemony through other means, reshaping the international monetary system. That's why I mentioned the structural power, reshape the structures to keep dollar hegemony through US dollar backed stable coins. And then in the other countries of the world, people are reacting. Well, the BIS, I already mentioned it. They had some hesitation in the beginning, but now they are great enthusiasts of CBDCs. But they have a nice thing. They say anything crypto can do, CBDC can do it better. But they are involved in several projects. But they keep this mantra without mentioning that, well, at the end, there is this need of of reducing the hierarchies of the world. The BIS does not comment on that. They insist in the mantra of faster, cheaper, and so on and so forth. And very importantly, I said I would tell you later, and this is the moment, the BIS withdrew from the M-Bridge project last year in October 2024. I guess it was October. What I remember is that it was 1 or 2 weeks after the BRICS summit in Kazan. So it was not by chance. And they said that they were abandoning the M-Bridge project. M-Bridge project, again, is the one led by China. They were abandoning it because it reached a minimum viable stage, so the central banks could develop it by themselves. But I made a lot of interviews, and the background information everybody has is that it was a geopolitical move. Right, so they didn't want to be in a project which was aimed at being used for de-dollarization or to avoid sanctions and so on and so forth. So the BIS has this this clear stance in regard to the new payment systems. And then the Eurozone, it's interesting because they do not make mentions to the asymmetries of the IMFS. They do not insist in the possibility or pertinence of having a multi-currency world, multi-currency payments, and so on and so forth. But the geopolitics is very clearly behind the creation of the digital euro as well. It was less clear in the beginning, but now with Trump, it's becoming more and more clear. Every day you see some of the high official people at the ECB saying that it's very important to create the digital euro to reduce dependency on US dollar credit cards or US dollar companies, payment service providers, right? So this is one of the main reasons. Nowadays, I don't know, it's 60 or something like that of the payments, of the digital payments in Europe use MasterCard or Visa. And then we could not think of that last year, but now we can think of that. Imagine if the US makes sanctions against Europe, right? One of the people I interviewed last year, it was a high staff of an European central bank, and he said, you can imagine if the US makes a sanction against Europe. And for me, it was totally crazy idea. But now I see that, well, maybe it can happen. I don't know. Nobody knows. But then the point is that this geopolitics is also behind the creation of the digital euro. Lagarde is the whole time talking about a global euro moment. Well, now it's the moment for the euro to strengthen its international status and so on and so forth. Then, and then in the global south, many countries see CBDCs and the new cross-border payment systems as a possible vector for de-dollarization, not in the sense of national de-dollarization as Nigeria, Ecuador, whatever, but international de-dollarization. And then China, and then obviously the whole discussion within the BRICS about creating a BRICS platform. In my opinion, it's, well, I don't think that we can expect reforms coming from a cooperation, global north, global south. Even Europe, and even if I am in France, I have to tell you that, even Europe, while saying that, well, it's better to reduce dependency on the US dollar, they are saying, why? To increase the weight of the euro, you know. So I don't expect the Eurozone to make collaboration with the global south for payments in diverse currencies. I don't know. Most of the projects, cross-border projects, are even though who involve the global south, they are dominated by the global north. The exception is the M-Bridge, right? And then I also won't have time to go into the details, but with Rudi Bougueli, who is a friend of Romain as well, very an excellent economist, we made a paper to discuss the M-Bridge and to see to what extent it may or not help in the idea of curbing or de-dollarizing the world economy, right? And it is a possibility, since my time is finishing. It is a possibility, but there are obstacles. And one of the important obstacles for the M-Bridge or whatever platform that may be created to deal with several currencies is the foreign exchange operation. Because as you know, the foreign exchange operation almost always goes through the US dollar. We had 2 weeks ago the new triennial survey of the BIS. It's a very important survey, and it showed that 89% of the foreign exchange operations in the world have the US dollar in one of the sides of the operation. Only 11 are pairs of currencies which do not have, you know, the US dollar in either side of the operation. So it's not easy to create a new system without having the dollar as the vehicle currency. Because then you would have to create dedicated corridors for pairs of currencies, I don't know, South Korean won and Brazilian real, you know, directly for direct chains, or Thailand baht. And the way of doing it, Project Mariana, for those who are interested, is an interesting project. Try to create automated market makers for foreign exchange operations, but there is a need of pre-funding, meaning that, well, the actors would have to pre-fund the currency for the exchange, and then pre-funding in dollar is something, and pre-funding in 30 different currencies, pre-funding in currencies we are not very much used. It's not, well, viable economically, maybe not viable economically. So there are plenty of doubts related to that. And then I come to my final remarks. If you want, we can discuss it later as well. Well, then my conclusion is that technology won't be enough to dethrone the US dollar. The technological changes are not in itself enough to make it, because dollar hegemony is not related only to technology. It is also technology, but it's the size of the US economy, it is the geopolitical power, it is about military power. We didn't discuss it here, but if you want, we can. It is about military power. So there are the reasons behind dollar hegemony are not only technology. So technological changes are insufficient to dethrone the US dollar, but I do see a movement. I studied the international monetary system I've been studying for the last 20 years. And sometimes it's boring because you don't see changes. Even this triennial survey, you see, and the US dollar, now it's 89. 3 years ago, it was 88. And I'm serious on that. No. The only thing which changes is the renminbi. It's interesting. But then after 20 years studying it, I do see some movements We cannot predict what will happen, but what are the movements? One is obviously the shift in the role of China for the world economy. This is something to be considered, obviously. Chinese economy will be the first one, even in nominal terms, in some years, right? And then those three layered, because they are totally connected, right? It is creating rising geopolitical tensions between some of the most powerful countries. And then the US is more explicitly using its currency as a weapon. It always did it, but now is more clear than ever, right? And then, coming also from the other two, there is this political disposition of many countries in the world, individually or collectively, to try to reduce the dependency on the US dollar. It's happening even in Europe, as I told you. So there is a movement. There is a movement. I wouldn't say that we are about to have the end of dollar hegemony. It's the contrary. I even have papers in which I argue the contrary. The dollar dominance is still very strong because the international financial market is the US market, okay? The importance of the US capital market, financial market for the world is still incomparable. So we won't see the dethronement of the dollar in the near term, but there are some movements, right? It's also unpredictable because the US is reacting and will react even in a stronger way. Trump said some months ago that losing the dollar hegemony would mean like losing a world war. I don't know if you saw it. So it shows to what extent he's ready to defend dollar hegemony, right? But then a possible scenario with the CBDCs is a kind of a fragmentation of the architecture, the coexistence of cross-border payment systems with unpredictable outcomes. But then what is very clear, and I finish here, is that geopolitics is behind this whole thing. It's not about technologies and technicalities. It is about geopolitics for the CBDC, for the stable coins, for everything. And Global South countries should reinforce their voice in this whole scenario to try to navigate in these turbulent waves. And I finish here. Thank you very much.